This is an instruction from beloved Saint Germain from the Bridge to Freedom Journals, Book 3. Be ready, your help will be needed. Through the coming of great world changes, we come into strange days now, when great numbers of people may be in distress. They will need your calls to set into action the transmuting powers of the violet fire, which you have been prepared to call forth. Bless your dear hearts. You are now, and have been for many years, through your devotion to my violet flame, transmuting much more discordantly qualified energy than you know, much that does not even belong to yourselves. So straighten your shoulders, raise your head in the dignity of gods and goddesses of freedom, realizing that if the so-called sinister force does make an inroad into your world, emotionally, mentally, etherically, or physically, it may not necessarily be your own. It is just destructively qualified energy coming into the violet fire for redemption. Let us learn to live above the tensions which plague the consciousness of the people of the world. There is no way for you to survive as a spiritual movement or even as a spiritual group if you live below what I have chosen to call the waterline, where there is fear, all sorts of distress, intolerance, hate, anger, rebellion, and jealousy. If you do, you are then a part of the mass creation and the mass mind. You are in the bottom of the pit of human creation, instead of dropping a rope, our instruction, to those below you, by which you can raise them, by their acceptance, out of the darkness of human iniquity into the light of God that never fails. In the great cities, you have a tremendous opportunity to raise and free life, because of the very pressures of so many millions of life streams living there. Nearly all come with one desire within their hearts, and that is to find expression for their particular talents and their particular developed momentums, or through proximity to great numbers of people to earn their living. These millions of souls, all gathered, know very little, if anything, of the law of mercy and compassion, and know practically nothing of the activities of the seventh ray. So in these cities, countries, and nations all over the world, where there are those fortunate life streams who know of the sacred fire and how to call its violet flame into action, these have the joy, responsibility, and opportunity of setting their fellow man free through its use. Never limit your presence. Now, as the beloved Mary said to you recently, and it cannot be repeated too often, do not limit the powers of your I Am presence. Please, beloved ones, become reacquainted with that glorious presence, which I choose to call the magic presence, because of its wonderful omnipotent power and its willingness to act to and through you at all times. Personally, you could not possibly even attempt to rehabilitate the entire human race, the 7.5 billion who are already in embodiment, besides those billions who are awaiting physical embodiment here, and all those who have been released who are now working out their salvation in the various temples and spheres at inner levels. No, of course not, but your presence can. Your infinite individualized I Am presence has sustained you for eons of time. Then, as was described to you some time ago by the Lord Maitreya, when the outer consciousness voluntarily disconnected itself from the conscious contact with the I Am presence, the I Am presence continued in graciousness and kindness to keep pouring its stream of light and energy into your physical heart to sustain your outer consciousness and give you the use of intelligence, emotional feeling, power of thought, memory, and power of physical action. Your presence and mine are not limited in any way. Your presence and mine are one in action, in glorious perfection, and that presence, which is all-knowing, is capable of instantly directing from itself 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 rays of transcendent blazing light into whatever condition, place, or person requires assistance. Therefore, can you not, with all humility, realize that the outer self, as Jesus said, is nothing? Will you not raise your deep and sincere attention to that presence and make it feel that, for once, you desire to work consciously with it again? Then that presence will turn its attention to you. The stream of light, your silver cord, will permanently widen, and your capacity to serve will increase by that renewed partnership. From the heart of that presence, then, you can direct those mighty rays of intelligent light, within which is the violet flame of transmutation, for all of the life everywhere, which you ever may have injured, or which may have injured you, from the time that the shadows of human creation first began to fall upon this dear earth. Do you know that your presence can locate in the ascension temples, or in any realm, wherever they are now abiding, any life stream which you may have harmed at some time, whether they are in embodiment here now or not? That presence can and will, at your call, gladly balance that debt for you in 1 hour, perhaps in just 1 moment. Incidentally, those of you who have forfeited creatures as pets, or are associated with them in other ways, have you ever thought that perhaps you are paying back through them a service to life to balance previous actions? When in the past, in self-righteous and zealous enthusiasm, you offered animals upon sacrificial altars, as well as bird and human life? Oh, there is much that you do not know. Fortunately, there is a veil of mercy between the conscious mind and etheric memories, and that veil is drawn apart very slowly from time to time, because a quite sane man has been known to go completely mad just by looking upon the dweller on the threshold, as the human creation of his own life stream is sometimes called. There is again the balance. It is really a razor's edge. On the one hand, we have the complacent type of individual who feels that everything will come out all right, and there's no need to do anything about it. Then we have the over-tense one, so eager and desirous of rendering the service, whether it be individual, planetary, or cosmic, that he becomes so tense that the vibratory action of the presence cannot flow through him. There is a great balance and relaxation in a complete alertness to the reality of that presence, to the reality of ourselves, and to the capacity of the presence or ourselves to act through the causal body, directing our radiation and blessing at your call. In my life as Francis Bacon, I had come upon certain understanding of the law of re-embodiment, which interested me deeply. I was a great reader, and during the various temporary incarcerations in that embodiment, I had much time at my disposal. I became interested in the idea of my own past embodiments, and as I read about certain historical characters, they deeply touched me etherically. Feeling that perhaps I had some connection with these life streams in the past, I began to practice releasing the power of the presence to pay whatever personal debts I might owe to those life streams, even though I could not tell where they were abiding at the moment, whether they were disembodied or in embodiment, or in the compound, whether they were awaiting embodiment in the Sacred Heart Temple, or whether they were my next-door neighbours. That was not important. One day, however, before my ascension, while in deep contemplation of the presence and its violet fire of mercy, forgiveness, and transmutation, my inner sight was opened, and I had a glimpse of a farmer walking through a field, sowing seed. This man was heavy-hearted, and his head was bowed. Suddenly I saw a light ray from my presence go forth, within which was the violet fire. It blazed around that individual, instantly transmuting the cause of his distress, for which cause I had been responsible at one time or another. Thus was paid the particular debt which I owed that life stream. Then that individual raised his head, free of that burden, and actually ran laughing toward the farmhouse. Now that person never knew from whence his release came. I did not even know the name of that man, but I knew his burden was lightened, and that at least some of my karmic debt had been paid. Interesting, if you care to develop it. Balance required between all extremes. There are many aspects and uses of the great law which are interesting if one cares to think about and develop them. One must always remember to stay within the balance between indifference and over-conscientiousness, between pliability and stability, between every extreme, which I could continue to elaborate upon, between overconfidence and self-depreciation, between personal dignity and pride, between humility and self-abasement. That balance is really a razor's edge. The natural dignity of embodied men and women who truly represent freedom is expressed by their words, their works, and their lives, and by their walking humbly with their God. It is always joyous for me when I am given opportunity to speak to you, even briefly, and it is a happy and rewarding time for you too, because when I come closer than ordinary to you like this, I bring within the radiance of my being and into your atmosphere and world a much greater concentrate of that sacred fire of mercy, which I have loved and served so long. I have always said, you know, and wrote it into the plays which seem to please the people, as Shakespeare, that the quality of mercy is not strained. Mercy is so magnificent. If every man, woman, and child, animal and elemental, had to balance every jot and tittle of human mistakes, this world task of purification and freedom would take an eternity. Beloved Sanat Kumara then could not possibly have gained his freedom at this time, and there would have been really only one solution to the problem, the dissolving of the entire planet. But the mercy of the Eternal is always waiting for you to call it into action, thus utilizing its powers. It is also waiting for you to make your calls through the use of decrees which have been given to you. If you will stay with them, they will give you within yourself all the proof you will ever need of the efficacy of the violet fire's power called forth. This will mean more to you than all the riches of all the world. You see, when you have gained the power to consciously and instantly sublimate and transmute imperfection into perfection, life will not be long enough for you. You will scarcely want to go home when the call comes. It takes alertness of the mental body, as well as common sense and reason, and it takes your personal interest in the application of the law to bring it into outer manifestation for you. Look at the interest that Edison took in the study of electricity and the hours and months and years which he spent in just learning to harness its power. Is that of much permanent importance to this planet as the violet fire of mercy and compassion, which can be called forth to transmute human shadows into light, sickness into health, financial lack into abundance, and so on? Oh, that you would let me stir into action that wellspring of enthusiasm which is buried deep within you for the reality and efficacy of the use of the violet fire. When our beloved Jesus said to those who came to him for help, "Thy sins are forgiven thee," he used his miracle-producing violet flame. And as the people saw its instantaneous action through his works, there was stirred up some enthusiasm for the use of the violet fire. But that was only a temporary accomplishment. There were only 20 or 30 people from the entire known world at that time who had only a half interest in his mission. Later, beloved Mary only had 40. So you see, we are not doing too badly with the numbers we have now, even though it seems at times as though we do not expand as rapidly as I certainly want us to, and as you in your hearts do too. Prepare now for service to come. Now there is this question of readiness again, and the beloved Mahachahan has asked me to speak to you briefly concerning this. It is a most important subject, and one which I think perhaps you should seriously consider in some of your free moments. You never know ahead of time just when you will be called, or to what post. I will tell you this much, that, as a matter of law, you will always be put in a position of the individual whose endeavours you have criticized. Therefore, it is wise to desist from criticizing another life stream, for should you find yourself in his place, you might not be quite as comfortable as you were in your own, nor be as productive there as you were then, nor be as productive there as you were when from your own place you watched with folded arms the errors of your predecessor, which errors then seemed so obvious to you. But in a lighter vein, be ready at a moment's notice for any summons to service which might come is most important. It is something which has been brought to our attention recently. None of us knew that at the very moment when beloved Moira's petition was granted by Helios and Vesta for the opportunity to start our new activity, Lord Buddha then began to prepare himself by expanding his causa body until it was the same size and perfection as that of Sanat Kumara, with the same outpouring of love and power. As we told you, at the time of the transferring of the title and the powers of the Lord of the world from Sanat Kumara to Buddha, their two causal bodies coming together were like two exact halves of an orange. The radiation was the same. Now Lord Buddha did that without being told. He did it without being asked, all on his own, as we say. So did the beloved Lord Maitreya prepare himself to take up the office of the new Buddha. Beloved ones, when we speak so to you, it is not to engender any fear. It is not to make you feel tense in any way, so that the presence cannot even get 5% of its energy through to you. No, we speak thus to you in order that you may be better prepared for your service which lies ahead. For you do not know where or when you will be called. Beloved Almora has mentioned this to you several times. He spoke of you being ready to go to far-off places like Tibet, for instance, to render some service which you could give there. Are you ready financially, physically, etherically, mentally, and emotionally? Are your affairs in order? Are you so pliable that you could go in perfect happiness, just in the garments which you are wearing now, and live in all sorts of inconvenience? Think about this. Now today I bring you not only the benediction of myself, but also that of the beloved Goddess of Liberty, whose focus is established in the harbour of New York, who has chosen to welcome here from every land all those who have need of her assistance. Will you remember that, at the time of my own ascension, the very first being I met in that octave was the same Goddess of Liberty? Speaking to her then, I asked her if she knew from whom I might get more help for those of you whom I had left behind. She assured me that there was such a one, and later I found that she was speaking of her dear self. Since that time, she has most lovingly and graciously given all of us that help. Thank you, and good morning, Saint Germain.